Morning, everyone. We have to consider, or at least take into mind, why the scribes and Pharisees are sort of obsessed with keeping the law, and why are they, in a certain sense, stalking Jesus, going about and seeing when he will break the law. And that is, the reason why that is because by this time in the history of Israel, the Pharisees and the scribes have developed this idea that any breaking of the law is going to incur punishment. It's going to bring about the wrath of God. In a certain sense, you can see how they can get this idea from reading, the Book of Kings, any account from the Old Testament where there's this infidelity to the covenant, and then the Lord hands over his people to the Babylonians, to the Assyrians, and then there's this the exile, suffering. And currently in this time, we know that they are under the oppression of the Romans. And so what they believe is that simply you have to obey and things will be better. You have to obey and things will be better, and that's all you need to do. And so they begin to add even more laws to what the Lord had already inscribed in the Ten Commandments. They begin to take everything to the extreme so that you don't even come close to breaking the law. And in this they cultivate this mentality of legalism and wrathfulness, this wrathful view of God, that God will immediately bring about his wrath upon them. So all that's necessary to do is physically obey. And so the heart is completely neglected. But the Lord comes and he wants to restore the image of the Father in Israel. He wants to be able to show his people that the Father is loving. And he wants to give a new perspective, or better yet, he wants to restore the perspective concerning the law. He wants to show them that the law is not this chain that you need to obey by, but it's actually a path to freedom. It's a path to human happiness. It's the path to human flourishing. And that is why when St. Paul, in this first reading in the first letter to the Corinthians, when he sees this transgression against morality, against the law, he is concerned by it. He very much addresses it, and he, in a certain sense, declares an excommunication here of this individual who's having an affair with his stepmother. And what fundamentally an excommunication is, like the church always reveals the spiritual and the invisible and makes it manifest, right? So when someone has declared their life to be outside of the church and has been obstinate in that and has not repented, then the church herself reveals that as well through an act of excommunication to say, this is what this person has chosen. And in a certain sense, I know Father John preached on this yesterday, and it's very much true that this is a medicinal act. This is an act of healing for the individual so that they can see clearly the nature of their actions. That this is not just about an arbitrary obeying of laws and following customs, but it's actually concerning with the desires of the human heart and what this individual is actually made for. And I think a great analogy is one that a classmate of mine gave in one of my first year class in seminary of the nature of excommunication. And he said that sometimes you can really appreciate the beauty of a church when you're out in the cold and the darkness of the world. Because if you think about even this church with the stained glass windows, you can really appreciate the stained glass windows when you're walking outside and it's dark outside in the cold, or so you can see that there's beauty within. And it's that same experience that brings back the prodigal son, that he experiences exactly what he was looking for, and he's stung by it. Is hurt by it because the law is objective to human nature. And it is in that moment that he remembers the beauty of living with the Father, of living a life of grace, and that compels him to come back. The danger, of course, with people who are living in objective sin or living away from the Lord is that in time, if they become complacent and they don't have an encounter with beauty, then their will becomes maligned, and then they will choose to go against God willingly. And certainly that is the fate of hell, right? To say, I know that there is a God, that he is all good, that he is all loving, and that I would choose a life without him. I choose an eternity without him. So that's a very irrational thought, and hell is irrational, but it's one that's true, and many people do end up choosing by their free will. And so I think for us to pray that they may encounter the beauty of the church, the beauty of the law, the beauty of a life of grace, so that they can see that in comparison to the reality of their misery and say, I'm called to something better. And by doing so, they can be drawn into that beauty for which they were made for. And in our evangelical mission, I think that is part and parcel with how we speak, with what we say, but ultimately how we live. That our lives should reflect that beauty, especially around those individuals who are away from the church. I know a few of my cousins. I have one cousin in particular who I struggle to love. He's in college and he's an atheist. And I try to talk about the beauty of life, the beauty of goodness to him, because I believe that a life without God is fundamentally going to bring about some sort of deep misery and that he will recognize one day. And I'm sure the same is true with your family members or friends who may be away from the faith or from the church. But speaking about these things, I think will eventually draw them back.